Welcome back. We're in class. Okay. So we're on exam 79, section 1, logical reasonings. Attempt to get through questions 16 through 21. 16. Which one of the following conforms most closely to the principle illustrated above? Broader statement above, an example of that below. So again, as you read, don't leave until you have a sense for what that principle is. So I have my slash marks. University president, when a faculty member's falsification of research was uncovered, the media treated it as evidence of the university's low standards, even though in truth it was a mere case of dishonesty. Okay. But since vigilance with respect to academic standards is always necessary, it's good that standards have become a topic of discussion. Okay? So you have to stop for a second and take that in and say, well, you're presented with a larger and a lesser issue. Right? The larger issue is standards, and the lesser issue here was the dishonesty. And so even though the dishonesty, even though the lesser thing here wasn't valid, it was good to look into it because it caused us to look into the greater thing. And I'm done. You know, one of the 5 answer choices is going to mimic that. So again, in briefing, go directly to the credited answer choice, and here it's choice B. The latest government scandal has been attributed to lack of oversight, although the true cause of the scandal was simple corruption, larger, lesser. All right, so then we go on from that to, nonetheless, this discussion of oversight is welcome because oversight is important in its own right. Larger, lesser, even though the lesser item is really, you know, it doesn't really impact on the larger issue. That it brings us to the larger issue is a good thing. So again, if you see the analogy between the dishonesty and the standards, and here the oversight and the corruption, they are analogous. So now with that, go back and look at the other choices. But you want to just keep your mind on, because again, you'd be reading this at, you know, A, B, C, D, and E, if that's what you're going to do. You got to get through A to get to B. But now, let's see what A says. A says the largest government scandal was caused primarily by a lack of oversight, which in turn led to corruption. Since no amount of oversight can eliminate all corruption, it is important that the problems with oversight are not the only topic of discussion. And that's simply not analogous to larger, lesser, you know, not when I say lesser, I don't mean dishonesty is, you know, not important. But the dishonesty itself is not relevant to the issue of standards. So A is not following that at all. C, the latest government scandal has been attributed to both lack of oversight and corruption. It's attributed to 2 things. As a result, these important concerns are now being discussed. So despite the harm that it has caused, it is good that the scandal occurred. And again, that's not, you know, the fancy word is, it's disanalogous. You know, because you're saying both of those things are worthy of exploration, both are involved. It's just not what we had. D, the latest government scandal has been analyzed as a case of simple corruption, although corruption had little to do with it, because the true cause of the scandal was lack of oversight. Attributing the cause of the scandal to simple corruption is harmful. And that's you know, an examination of the 2 acts that caused the investigation to take place, not that one act was unrelated to, you know, to the real issue that was being covered. And E, The latest government scandal has been analyzed as a case of simple corruption, with no mention of the role played by the lack of oversight. Nonetheless, the focus on corruption is welcome because corruption played the largest role in the scandal. And again, they're analogizing corruption to dishonesty, and to have focused on the dishonesty would have not been productive because that wasn't what it was about. And so here, E is disanalogous as well. So the answer is B. Question number 17. Which one fund would be most useful to know in evaluating the argument? And everybody's different. But this issue is not heavily tested, or it has not been heavily tested. That's certainly not my favorite. But okay, let's see what we have here. So I'm looking for something. The answer choices. If I knew that would be handy in evaluating the argument I have in front of me. Let's get the argument. Over the next decade, our city will be replacing all of its street signs. Okay, I got it. With signs that are designed for improved readability. So stop. Just you see them all coming down, and you see them all going up. Okay. But since no one is complaining about the current signs, installing the new ones is a colossal waste of time and money. I am drawn to that word colossal. But I mean, it's not. I don't need this guy, right? We need you. No, we don't need you. Everybody see the signs are up. The signs are coming down. The signs are being replaced. The conclusion is because the new signs themselves don't improve readability a whole lot, if at all, it's a colossal waste of money. It does seem to me that there's almost an assumption built into that. I don't know about you, but the way I see it is like every sign in the city is coming down and being replaced with this new sign. It seems to me you got to get there to say it's a colossal waste. But can my mind really produce what the answer choice is going to look like? No, it can't. In this issue, it can't. And again, that tells me that the level of difficulty for me is elevated. So I would be stuck going A, B, C, D, and E on the test without the advantage really of having this articulated. So let's see what the answer choice was, and do I understand it? It's C, and that is, it would be helpful for us to have known what percentage of its street signs does the city replace annually in the course of ordinary maintenance. Yeah, and that would be, it would be helpful, right? Because if you were replacing it during the course of ordinary maintenance, that would cost you something, right? You'd be taking down this sign, so maybe just to replace it in the ordinary course of maintenance would cost you X dollars, right? So if you were replacing a significant percentage of all street signs during this period anyway, then it would be harder to get to this being a colossal waste of time and money, because you'd have to read into that the replacement signs are just so much terribly expensive to make. It would just, that would be helpful to know. It doesn't mean it still wouldn't be a colossal waste of money, but it makes it more likely that if C is true, it would not be a colossal waste of time and money, both factors. It wouldn't be a colossal waste of time because you'd be replacing the sign anyway. And it wouldn't be a colossal waste of money because you'd be paying for the replacement sign. Okay, so the other choices. A, what features of the new street signs improve the readability? That's got nothing to do with the colossal waste of time and money. So no. B, are the new street signs considerably more expensive to manufacture than the current street signs were? Yeah, I think that would help. That would help with respect to the element of money, right? You're saying they're much more expensive, but that doesn't address the issue of time, where choice C addresses both time and money. So I love B. If you pick B, pugs, but C is the more precise answer. D, do any other cities plan to replace their street signs with signs designed for improved readability. Who cares? If it's a colossal waste one place, it'd be colossal waste another place, so no. E, were experts consulted when the new street signs were designed? That's not going to the issue of, I mean, you can infer whatever you want based on what you believe about experts, but the simple fact of the matter is that does not help me address whether or not they're going to be a colossal waste of time and money. Okay, let's take a look at question number 18. 18, the issue is the argument requires assuming which of the following. Got it. Slash marks, I'm ready. A large survey of scientists found that almost all accept Wang's law. Not all, but almost all accept Wang's law in this survey. And almost all, so that's repeated, know the results of the Brown-Eisler experiment. Almost all except A, and almost all know the results of B. But those results are the Brown-Eisler experiment, but those results together with Wang's law contradict the Mink's hypothesis. Okay, so they contradict this hypothesis. Conclusion, therefore most of the scientists surveyed reject the Mink's hypothesis. And what jumps out at me there, and it does jump out at me, is since you're looking for an assumption, the assumption is, to me, they know you can't reject something you don't know. So it suggests that they had to understand what the Mink's hypothesis was. How do you reject something you don't know it exists, right? So to reject something, assumes a knowledge of the thing you're rejecting. So that's where I'm going. And here the answer is A. The scientists surveyed are generally aware that the results of the experiment, together with Wang's law, contradict the hypothesis. Yeah. That'd be, in other words, all A is doing is bringing that word awareness into this, right? You had to be aware of it. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Let's look at the other choices here. B, the scientists in the survey who know the results of the experiment are exactly the same ones who accept Wang's law. No, they don't have to be exactly the same ones. This says most of the scientists surveyed, so they don't have to be exactly the same ones. There can be some who don't know both of them, but most of them reject based on, so the suggestion there is, the implication there is, since you're saying most reject the hypothesis, the underlying premise is most are familiar with, both the survey and Wang's law, but most is not almost all. I'm sorry, most does not mean that they're exactly the same ones who accept Wang's law. C, almost all the scientists surveyed are familiar with the way in which the results of the experiment were obtained. You don't need to be familiar with the manner in which the experiment was conducted. You just need to be familiar with the results of the experiment. C, the sample is large enough to be representative of scientists in the field. No, it doesn't, because all you're doing is saying, this is what the survey says. You're not saying, and therefore it's what the larger community says, it's what the survey, and that conclusion is, therefore most of the scientists surveyed, right? Not most of the scientists generally. And E, Wang's law has in fact been shown to be true. It just says they're familiar with Wang's law. Not that, when you say you accept the law, so you have here, almost all accept Wang's law. Okay. Can you accept something that is not true? And the answer is sure you can. You do it all the time. You accept something, and then later on in life you may question it. So the acceptance of it is not a requirement. It's not something necessary for the argument's validity. Number 19. Which one of the following principles, if valid, most helps to justify the reasoning? Okay. So I'm getting reasoning, and I want a principle. And here's the reasoning. And again, remember, as you go from a specific to a broader outcome, that's where you are here. So here's the specific. Any literal translation is a compromise between two goals that, they cannot be entirely reconciled. You have a colon. Faithfulness to the meaning of the text and faithfulness to the original author's style. Okay, so we have two things. So you just, stop. You got a slash mark there, stop and say, if you're going to translate something, you're balancing the meaning of the text and the author's original style, and they can't be entirely reconciled once you decide you're going to translate it. That's the reasoning. Here's the conclusion. Thus, even the most skillful translation will be at best a flawed approximation of the original work. Okay. So the conclusion then says, okay, based on that reasoning, you've got to come to an outcome where no matter how skilled that translator is, you're going to end up with a flawed approximation of the original work. And to take this to a broader statement where you're not just talking about literary translations, you'd be talking about if you're going to try to be faithful to the text and faithful to the author's style, basically, you're not going to be completely successful. And I'm just leaving it at that. So I imagine that the level of difficulty in the area we're in is elevated. So you don't try to be overly precise. You're unlikely, I think, to be as clear here as you're going to be in questions 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 overall. So I'm done with that. Now let me go. Let me see what the credited answer choice was. And here's D. And D says, any translation that is not entirely faithful to both the meaning of the text and the original author's style will be, at best, a flawed approximation of that work. Yeah, and do you see how you just say, well, if that statement were true, then the argument above is valid, because if you're talking about now here any translation as opposed to just a literary translation, so it's not covering more than just literary translations. And if you had this plaque over your sink in the kitchen, and the plaque in your sink said, and please don't do this, any translation that is not entirely faithful to both the meaning of the text and the original author's style will be at best a flawed approximation of that work. Well then, you would know that the literary text you have in front of you is at best a flawed approximation of the text, of the work. Sorry. Okay, now let's look at the other choices. A translation of a literary work should be entirely faithful to neither the meaning of the text nor the original author's style. Don't ever pick A again. That's just horrible. So, no. B. If a literary translation is flawed as an approximation of the original work, it cannot be regarded as a successful compromise between faithfulness to the meaning of the text and faithfulness to the original author's style. That's not the principle. It may well be faithfulness as a compromise. It's just not faithful fully to both the meaning of the text and the original author's style. C. The most skillful literary translation of a work will not necessarily be the most balanced compromise between faithfulness to the meaning of the text and faithfulness to the author's original style. That's certainly not the principle. That it may well be, the most skillful literary translation may be all those things, but what it's not is faithful to what it needs to be faithful to. And E. Not even the most skillful literary translation could be faithful to both the literal meaning of the text and the original author's style. And I absolutely love E. I mean, I adore E. It's wrong, but again, hugs if you pick the, and we'll never really know why it's wrong until they decide, if they do decide to come out with explanations. The first thing is that the two things jump out at me in E. One is it doesn't broaden the issue. You're talking about, you see how D is talking about any translation, and E is talking about the skillful literary. Right? So one thing is that you're not abstracting out. Per principle, you really need to do that. And the second is the reasoning is there to justify conclusion. And the conclusion is talks about even the best translation will be a flawed approximation, and this doesn't get you to the conclusion. This would just be a rehash of the reasoning itself, but the conclusion goes beyond that. So I'm finding E, again, both on is it's not broad enough. It doesn't take this out past literary stuff, and the conclusion talks about what constitutes a flawed approximation of the original work, and E doesn't mention that. So I think it's a great choice. I think they're evil, and D is the answer. Number 20. Be very, very careful. When you see the word accept, I mean, they're kind enough to put it in block letters. Again, my sense of this is that when the word accept appears there, the level of difficulty is ratcheted up. Let's see what we have here. If the statements are true, each of the following could be true except. So I'm really looking for what must be false. All I care about is what must be false. That's my mission. Okay. Here goes. Television, telephones, and other electronic media encourage imprecise, uncritical thinking. Okay. Yet, critical thinking is the only adequate protection against political demagogues who seek to exploit people by presenting emotionally loaded language as an objective description of reality. Boy, there are a lot of that. Okay. So what do I have here? I'm introduced to a statement that television, telephones, and electronic media are imprecise and uncritical. Got it. Next one said, they're uncritical, and yet critical thinking is the only adequate protection. The only, and only is a really, really important word, is the only adequate protection against political demagogues. And then there's a description of demagogues who seek to exploit people by presenting emotionally loaded language as an objective description of reality. When you're looking for something that it must be false, I can't form that. That's going to have to come from the answer choices. So just be prepared to read. And again, if I'm here in question number 20, if I'm back in this area where I suspect the fail rate's high, I'm going to read A, E, D, C, B, whatever it is. But let's go directly to the credited answer choice, which is D, and say, does it make sense that that's a statement that must be false? The mere presence of an orderly system of government in a society provides adequate protection against political demagogues. And that cannot be true because the specific language of the argument is critical thinking is the only adequate protection. Critical thinking is the only adequate protection, and therefore the statement in D that the mere presence of an orderly system of government would give you adequately protection is a statement that must be false. And again, once you have that, it's like, okay, like A, there are no political demagogues in some highly technological societies. It's not a statement that has to be false. B, political demagogues are not the only ones who seek to exploit people by presenting emotionally loaded language as an objective description of reality. That's fine. They don't have to be. C, highly emotional people are more easily exploited than less emotional people. That could be true. Who cares? E, the mere presence of electronic communications technology in a society provides adequate protection against the erosion of media freedoms. And I really think E is in there. I mean, I get why you would pick E. I really think it's in there because you read past D, which you shouldn't do, unless you're going A, E, D. Okay. But the question here is, it doesn't have to be false that would protect you against an erosion of media freedoms. It would have to be false that it would protect you against political demagogues. So the answer there is D. Okay, let's exit out here with question 21. Which one finding is true most seriously weakens the argument? Okay, my slash mark, I'm ready to go. People with higher than average blood levels of a normal dietary byproduct called homocysteine, whatever it is, right? But people with higher levels of that are twice as likely to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's as are those with average or below average homocysteine levels. So you got to stop. And they've cited the correlation. And I'm sorry, the issue here is we want to weaken this. So you can weaken this by pointing out immediately, right? I don't know where they're going with this, but all you've done is cited the correlation. In other words, right now I know that the byproduct, the homocysteine, could be responsible for the Alzheimer's disease, but it could also be the case that the Alzheimer's disease is responsible for the high level of the homocysteine. Here's the conclusion. Thus, it is likely that the risk of developing Alzheimer's could be reduced by including in one diet large amount of B vitamins and folic acid, which convert homocysteine into substances known to have no relation to Alzheimer's. You know, they could have made this a flaw issue, but they made it a weakening issue. It's not going to make any difference. I'm looking at this, since you've asked me to weaken this, the assumption here is that homocysteine stuff is responsible for the Alzheimer, is cause of it and not the effect of it, and that's going to be the answer, I think. So look at the choice here is E. Alzheimer's disease tends to increase the level of homocysteine in the blood. Boy, you tested on that. And again, to leave the argument, which is the law, to leave that without having formed, without having done the analysis, is suicide, in my view. Quickly, A, do we weaken it by saying many Alzheimer's patients have normal levels of that? No. B, that the substances into which the homocysteine is converted can sometimes have harmful effects unrelated to Alzheimer's. That doesn't weaken it because we only care about Alzheimer's. C, B vitamins and folic acids are not metabolized by the body very efficiently when taken in the forms of the supplements. I do see how you would pick that. Again, that requires you to ignore the cause and effect, that you didn't get this stuff mixed up. And you're also told in the body of the law that you're taking large amounts of B vitamins, so even if they were inefficient, it does sound like they'd be absorbed. C, people whose relatives contracted Alzheimer's are much more likely to develop Alzheimer's than those who did not. It's not relevant. So the answer in 21 is E, and we're done.